Ladies and gentlemen, has voter fatigue ever mattered before? The MVP conversation this season has been frustrating. I don't like when we as NBA fans prop players up by bringing other players down. And I'm not saying you can't be critical of players or have preferences or discuss what certain players do better than others. 2 out of my 4 videos on this channel are me being critical of NBA teams and players, so it'd be very hypocritical of me to say that you can't. But that's not what I'm saying, and I'm getting off track. This MVP race has been amazing. Ja, Tatum, Luka, Embiid, Giannis, Jokic, they've all been playing at an insane level. Most years, any of these individual seasons would probably win them the MVP. So I understand people are going to have their own preference, and my number 1 choice could be your number 7, and guess what? That's okay. But when we're talking about so much talent in such a deep MVP pool, your only argument can't be voter fatigue. And of course, we're talking about Nikola Jokic. Mike Malone said a few days ago, or probably weeks now, that if your only reason as to not vote Jokic for MVP is that he won the last 2, then you're just being lazy. And I agree with him. If a player is playing like the MVP and has the best case for the MVP, I don't care if he won the last 2. I don't care if he won the last 3. He should be the MVP then. And usually people go, well, if that's the case, then player X should have won in year Y. And wrong! Or maybe that's what we're here to find out today. I've compiled a list of what NBA fans generally seem to consider the most egregious cases of voter fatigue, and we're going to go through each one and see if they actually were voter fatigue. Got it? Great.
Oh, that felt good. Was that sexy?
That
felt sexy.
warm.
So chronologically, this was the oldest example I could find with any real support, sort of. I think the reason people think that this was voter fatigue, and let me make it very clear, this was not voter fatigue, is because Bird was coming off 3 straight. 84 through 86, Bird won all 3 MVPs, and 85 and 86, he was 5 votes away from being unanimous in both of those years. So yeah. So I'll be the first to admit it's pretty shocking to see him come out and have statistically his best year yet and only receive 1 first place MVP vote. 28 points per game, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, shot 50, 40, 90. I'll agree, it's a bit weird that he only received 1 vote, but I'll also say that his case was not as strong as Magic's. I'm not going to sit here and say LA was bad, not by any means, but this was the first year of the Kareem era, and especially compared to Boston, Magic was playing with the worst roster. Ainge had a big year. Dennis Johnson was exceptional as a playmaker. Kevin McHale really had an amazing year. I think you could honestly argue it was Kevin McHale's best season of his career. And Robert Parrish, he was still Robert Parrish. So this was a very talented Boston team. I think honestly, the more I think about it, it was McHale who did it in for Bird, because Magic didn't have a co-star on the level of McHale anymore, or in really anyone close. Kareem had his first season under 20 points. He averaged 6 less points than he did the previous year. AC Green and Byron Scott were both still good, same with James Worthy, but it just was not as talented a roster as Boston's. Magic reflected his lack of offensive help on the court. He posted his career high in points, 24 points per game. He was still averaging 12 assists. He was remaining highly efficient. Also, yeah, the Lakers had the best record in the league by 6 wins, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 6 more wins than the Celtics, best record in the league. I'll hear the argument that Bird might have lost some votes, but this was Magic's MVP.
Look what I can do! What is white trash about that?
Remember that whole chronological thing? Yeah, throw it out the window. I realized that chronologically, the second MVP, my case for the second one would have spoiled the rest, so not doing that one yet. This is probably the one I have the least thoughts on, and that's probably because it definitely has the least credibility. I think people say voter fatigue for this one because they think Shaq was robbed of this MVP, and I'm not here to say you're wrong, but I'm also not here to say that he was robbed because of voter fatigue. They had pretty similar cases. The Suns won more games, so I could see why Nash won, but even if you think that Shaq should have won, it wasn't voter fatigue, because we're talking about a one-time MVP who won that MVP 4 years before this year. I'll hear the Shaq deserved it argument, but I'm not going to hear that it was voter fatigue.
Okay, now you're talking my language. I know this game.
Alright, so this is definitely my most touch grass section of the video, so bear with me here. Let's get the bias out of the way. I'm a big Bulls fan. I'm a big Bulls fan because of Derrick Rose and this season specifically. However, I think if I had never watched Derrick Rose play, if I had never been a Bulls fan, I just think I still would have chosen Derrick Rose to win this MVP. You see, the main argument for LeBron over Derrick Rose in 2011 is LeBron has the better stats. And if you just look at the paper, like if you just look at the stats on paper, yeah, he looks like he might have better stats. 26.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 7 assists. Compare that to Rose's 25 points, 4 rebounds, 7.5 assists. I guess if we're having a stats competition, LeBron deserved the MVP. I'll give you that. All right, fair. But, ladies and gentlemen, I myself am a fan of context. Context matters. And Derrick Rose won 4 more games than the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference. And let's look at those rosters, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a look at those rosters. Carlos Boozer and Joakim Noah missed a combined 67 games this season. D. Rose's starting center for a majority of the season was Kurt Thomas, and his starting shooting guard was Keith Bogans or Ronnie Brewer. Despite all this, the Bulls went 3-0 against the Heat in the regular season and boasted a 13-6 record against teams who won 50-plus games that season. Plus, the MVP is a largely narrative award. I want you to tell me right now who has the better narrative. The Miami Heat winning an expected high amount of games with LeBron playing expectedly good, or Derrick Rose carrying that bum injured roster to the number 1 seed in the Heat in the East over the Heat. Derrick, why can't I be MVP? Rose had the better case. I don't know. I'm probably getting my feelings with this one because I'm such a big Derrick Rose and Bulls fan. But I do get upset when people say Derrick Rose didn't deserve the MVP, or just in general when people say player X didn't deserve the MVP. Because here, let me give an example. I personally believe that James Harden deserved MVP more than Russell Westbrook in 2017. But listen to that. I believe he deserved it more. I'm never going to sit here and tell you that Russell Westbrook did not deserve the 2017 MVP. I think you could disagree with who won the MVP, but I think it's almost always foolish to say that somebody did not deserve the MVP. If they won the MVP, they deserve the MVP. Once again, you could think someone deserved it more, but these players are not just getting the MVP because they deserve it. I disagree with you, but I also will hear you out if you think LeBron deserved the award more than Derrick Rose. If you say you don't think Derrick Rose deserved the award, I won't hear you out. That was quite the long tangent, I'm sorry. But no, not voter fatigue. Derrick Rose deserved his MVP. LeBron didn't lose it because of voter fatigue. He lost it because D. Rose had the better case.
You are going to love it. I am. It's so good.
I did an unholy amount of research for this one and dug through players and team-by-team stats each year personally, so let's get into it. Jordan was coming off 2 back-to-back MVPs in 91 and 92, so I understand why people think this was voter fatigue, but I think you're just kind of wrong. The main argument I've heard is injury woes, and I don't think the Bulls had more injury woes than the Suns. Bill Cartwright missed 19 games. John Paxson missed 23 games, which also opened the door for BJ Armstrong to take that first leap, and then he became an all-star, I believe. I'm talking completely out of my ass right now, but BJ Armstrong was an all-star very soon after that. It might have even been this season. I don't believe so, but it was around this time. Those 2 players missing that many games doesn't even compare to Kevin Johnson missing 33 games, Barkley's second best player. And when Kevin Johnson was playing, he wasn't playing that good. And unlike BJ Armstrong, his replacement, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, his replacement did not perform up to his level, or even close to it. Well, I've heard the argument that Pippen and Horace Grant had worse offensive seasons, so Jordan had to carry more of the load. Are we forgetting that they were both still all defensive members? Despite all this, Phoenix won 62 games, 5 more wins than the Bulls, and the best record in the league. And here's where the most of the research came in, ladies and gentlemen. So one thing I noticed when I was looking at that season was the Suns were ranked first in offense, but the Bulls were ranked 15th. I'm like, that's pretty exceptionally low if you ask me, especially for an MVP. So I did some digging, I did some research, and I personally went through, I think since the year 1980. I looked through every season since 1984 when offensive rating was introduced to see how many players had won the MVP while falling outside of the top 10 in offensive rating, like their team as a whole. And after looking through all of those teams, all those stats on Basketball Reference, I have the answer. Hakeem in 94, Iverson in 01, Rose in 2011, and Westbrook in 2017. Some of the greatest carry jobs ever. Jordan did not have a roster comparable to this. So the truth of the matter is the Bulls probably just cooled down after 2 amazing seasons. And because of that, they didn't have the better regular season. And Charles Barkley and the Suns did. So he won the award. They just cooled down right when Phoenix picked up. So no, not voter fatigue.
I'm a Swedish plumber. I'm here to fix your pipes.
So what have we learned today? In 99% of cases, voter fatigue does not matter. I say 99% of cases because there's one where it actually does.
Oh, excuse me for being the most terrible man on the planet. I'm a terrible man. What are you doing?
Malone over Jordan in 1997 doesn't make any sense to me. I don't want to talk about the Heat trash can more than I have to, but let's just say he probably didn't have a case if Jordan wasn't coming off a legendary 96 season. They literally gave the award to Malone because they felt like the poor guy needed it. And, you know, history has shown that's not true. So what was the point of this video? I don't know. I guess I just kind of wanted to see if voter fatigue was real, you know? If when people say, well, he shouldn't win because of voter fatigue, is that ever actually mattered? Is that ever actually taken an MVP from anybody? And now we've seen only once in history has it actually ever mattered. And we can all agree that it shouldn't have mattered then. So it shouldn't ever matter again. I agree with Mike Malone. If your only reason to not vote Jokic for MVP is that he won the last 2, you're just being lazy. All right, let's change my MVP again. We're going Jokic, Tatum, Luka, Embiid, and Giannis. Sorry, KD. You gotta play more games, my boy.